Okay, while the fourth panel come up, this is the energy panel. A couple of thoughts came to me. What about margins? Isn't this going to be expensive? Is this a margin negative transition? That was the first thing. And I think the role of funds and reporting to try and differentiate compliant, good companies from bad is critical. Given asymmetric information here, we need to be able to figure that out. And if companies are smart, they will find ways of signaling that they are good in this regard that cannot be copied, replicated easily by bad companies in this. Please. Thank you. So Elisabet is moderating this, Head of Corporate M&A for Sweden at Linklaters. Thank you.
Thank you, and great to see so many here. So we will cover then the energy transition and the impact on the Nordic M&A market, and it will be linked to the ESG panel we just heard.
Yeah.
So we have an excellent panel, and we could talk about this topic, I think, for hours, but we have 20 minutes. I will let you introduce yourself, starting with Stein.
Yes, Stein Birkeland from Norges Bank. It's also known as the oil fund, so the sovereign wealth fund of Norway.
Hey, so I'm Nick Allen. I'm from London. Thanks very much for having me. I'm head of investment here at Vattenfall Heat UK.
Hi, great to be here, everyone. I'm Kristine, and I'm responsible for finding renewable M&A opportunities for Equinor, which is a big energy company.
And starting with the broader picture, in terms of energy transition, how far have the Nordics progressed in getting to net zero? What are the challenges and opportunities for market players, and how do the Nordics progress compared to the rest of Europe, the US, and Asia? And starting with the first part of the question, starting with you, Stein, how far have we progressed, and what do we actually mean by net zero?
Yeah, we're living my life in the fancy future.
A lot of noise here.
The half marathon.
How far have we progressed? It depends on how you look at things. You could say we have progressed quite a lot in the Nordics. But at the same time, we had a head start. There's a lot of renewable resources in the Nordics, and that allows a lot of EVs, etc. And we've had quite a long time, right? 100 years to get where we are, really, building up the renewable assets. But if we look at the wider energy transition challenge, it's something really different, and I'll explain why. First, energy or decarbonization towards net zero is a global challenge. It's not a regional one. Power, where the focus has been in Nordics, is really just 20% of the global energy system. Right, and renewables, which is one of the main solutions, is not evenly distributed across markets and regions, and those who have them maybe have a bigger role than others. And thinking about that a bit, there has been a change in the mantra from focus on the power sector to the overall energy system, right? That's what we have to decarbonize. And that means more complexity. It also means a bigger challenge from a scale perspective. And this is not really acknowledged and recognized by most the broader society. Net zero means net zero for all energy vectors: power, heat, transportation, and energy storage, which is a big one, especially since it's gas here in UK, right? And it's also feedstock to industries. And as I said, 20% is power, and then the big challenge is really molecules, right? And the solution is probably clean molecules as well. And that means a lot of complexity, which is different from a pure renewable power focus. When it comes to scale and considering energy independence, well, we have to think much bigger. And with much bigger, and also plan bigger, right? Think bigger, plan bigger, and work in that direction. If we think about, and this is really not something we see now. When I'm thinking planning bigger, where are the resources when we want energy independence? It's in the North Sea. It's also in Iberia, right? And it probably requires 1,000 gigawatts of offshore resources to be built out, and maybe 500 more gigawatts onshore in Iberia. And this, if you don't plan for it, it won't happen. And this Nordic region has a lot of resources. So the good thing is there's a lot of opportunities, but what is challenging is actually getting everybody to see the challenge and work together and plan accordingly.
And to share, I would assume. So, yes.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, for a more global outlook,
Yeah. Well,
how
I mean,
do you think we compare to
Yeah,
other regions?
Well, I mean, I think, for the Nordics, I mean, the Nordics obviously have this tremendous, hydropower resource. And I think that's a tremendous opportunity, really, for that to become almost a balancing item for the North Sea, as Stein said. The North Sea is going to be the power production hub for Northern Europe, and all of those. All of that power production is going to need, balancing power, spinning reserve essentially from hydro. Batteries won't be just the simple answer. To date, we've been talking about decarbonising the power sector. Now we're talking about decarbonising everything else. Well, everything else is actually much bigger than the power sector. And over the last 20 years, we've actually seen, falling production of electricity across Europe. And I think that's about to change because as, transportation, as industry, as, heating for homes and businesses all electrifies, the total amount of production of electricity is going to have to go up. And, batteries won't be the answer. There are going to be more interconnectors. With lots of interconnectors across the North Sea, but we need more interconnectors into the Baltics, into Poland, as that part of Europe looks to decarbonize, and then big question, for example, would we be importing rather than LNG? Will we be importing ammonia, from either the Middle East or Australia? There are unbelievably large projects being planned in Australia for production of ammonia. 10 gigawatt, offshore wind farms, 100 gigawatt onshore solar farms. And so Australia is really going to be making a bid to become this, green molecule provider of the future.
And are the Nordic politicians, are they doing enough? I mean, it's a lot of talk about the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, for example, and a lot of discussion whether
Europe's going to have to respond, right?
us.
Europe's going to have to respond.
Yeah,
obviously. I mean, there's no way that Europe can sit, by whilst that happens. So yes, I'd expect to see a response, and that response to be increasingly coordinated across the entire region.
And Kristine, what do you see? And what do you see in terms of challenges and opportunities with this transition?
So I think I have to echo Stein and Nick and say that, we have a very green grid, which is a very important step in terms of electrification because we're not going to be able to transition without it. When that's said, we have some of the best resources in all of Europe, so it should be given that we are where we are, and I think we're seeing that we're lagging massively in certain technologies. For example, in offshore wind, we are decades behind where UK and the rest of the Northern Europe is at the moment. What I think is the challenge is, we're talking about, it's not just the energy system that needs to change, it's the whole industry, right? It's the whole net zero journey, which means you have all different kinds of companies who've never been sort of overlapping in the same industrial areas before that are now focusing on the same type of project, same type of, I come across, new companies and new sectors in M&A transactions that we do all the time now, which means more competition. At the same time, the transition needs to be a commercial one. And we're sitting in a situation now where we have very strong balance sheet, and opportunities with high returns are challenging, as I'm sure you all agree.
And when will we get to net zero?
If anybody can define net zero in the room, please see me afterwards. Because I think everyone's talking about net zero. I don't think everyone actually really fully understands what that means. I mean, Vattenfall's latest wind farm has a levelized cost of, or a levelized, carbon footprint over its entire life cycle, over its, the entire production of 7 grams. Which, to be frank, if you told me 20 years ago, I'd have laughed at you. So it is incredible what's been done, but you're going to squeeze that number and squeeze that number. It's still not zero, but maybe it is possible to offset in the future. Who knows?
Let's hope for that. So going a bit more deeper into the M&A area. So considering the broadening of technology and that net zero will impact the whole economy and not only certain sectors, what do you see will be the future? Where will we see most M&A activity? Who will be the players and winners in this market?
Yeah, so I think I've touched on part of it already. So reflecting on, the fact that the net zero journey would be long, but what do we see in the short term, and maybe particularly in the Nordics? I think we'll see a diversification of technologies, meaning more solar, more offshore wind as we try and catch up with the rest of Europe. I think more hybrid projects, including hydrogen. And I think, you said storage is not the solution, but I think battery storage needs to be there, particularly in the short term, as we get more and more intermittent energy on the grid.
Yeah, I don't think it's the single answer. I think there's lots of elements.
No single answer. Where we've been focused in Equinor most recently is really trying to diversify our asset base. And we've actually been a net seller of offshore wind over the past couple of years in very hot markets, entering more into the onshore space, including batteries, and very focused on both hydrogen and carbon capture at the moment.
And will we see more cooperation among investors?
Among investors, that's a good question. I think linking back to the previous panel, what we want to see is actually more embracing the whole investment universe and want to move all companies towards net zero. And our fund has actually put out a climate action plan to get to net zero by 2050, hopefully. And to achieve that, there must be more collaboration between governments and also companies, because the complexity is increasing. Now, between investors, I'm not so sure. We're all very competitive. So.
But maybe also sharing the risk, or what do you say?
Well, yeah.
I mean, some of the schemes that are being talked about, will require multiple different types of investors and different layers of the capital structure. We talk, not even 10 years ago, talking about a 1 gigawatt wind farm was, very exciting, and our latest project is 4 gigawatts, and it's only going to go up from there, right? And some of the ideas that have been talked about, like these island transmissions in the middle of the North Sea and so on, that's 30 to 50 billion. Well, I mean, maybe you can get private capital to do all of that, but maybe not. So yeah, I think there's a role you know, for many different types of investors in the transition.
And do you see a risk? I mean, different technology, you don't know which technology will be the winning one, and maybe something we haven't yet seen, as we've discussed?
I think it's there's been a lot of debate about what is the winning technology. It's not one technology. It's a combination of a lot of solutions, and that is what I alluded to when I meant that complexity is increasing. We cannot only focus on renewable power and electric vehicles. You need a combination of everything. And I think what we might see over time is that actually adding more technologies and solutions to the system we already have will allow for repurposing of what we have to in the best way to actually achieve net zero in the time frame we want to do it. And if we, I mean, examples are like battery use for EVs, but they're also used for storage and balancing the grid, right? The very short term, not for seasonal storage. For seasonal storage, we need pumped hydro or hydrogen or synthetic fuels. And if you go in that route, you can also think about all the derivatives of that going into e-methanol or ammonia. And then you can really think about actually utilizing the infrastructure we have today for liquids and gases. And then you think about, well, what is the storage opportunity in the existing system? We already have it, so it's really just using it in a different way. Now, to do that change requires a lot of work and planning, coordination between companies and governments and different stakeholders and also investors. We play a role. You know, we put capital into new companies and also do a lot of engagement with companies on, are you really looking at this in the right way type of engagement, right? The challenging top management of companies, challenging boards and so forth. So,
but hopefully also maybe reducing the risk then if you can use existing structures.
I think that is, it's not only, clearly reducing the risk, but also increasing resilience. I mean, imagine a world where you only go towards renewable power. It's very vulnerable. And if all cars are just EVs, very long charging times, very vulnerable. It's very difficult to store, right? But if you have two systems, which we already, even more, which we already have today, we have a gas system that can back up a power system. And in the fuel sector, we have, you know, electricity now. We have gasoline, we have diesel, we have LNG, LPG, you know. So I'm not saying these will stay around in a net zero world, but
maybe short term. So
short term, and then you have a much more resilient system if you have a more integrated system between gas and electricity.
I mean, you're always going to need peaking and backup, right?
Yeah.
You know, and if you have to run your gas-fired power station 3 days a year, well, you have to run it 3 days a year, you know.
We're actually running out of time, so we're not going into the question of nuclear and whether we will see any M&A in nuclear, which I really wanted to discuss, but too short. But do we have any questions from the audience? So maybe one question.
Magnus from Deutsche Bank. So you talked a lot around net zero, but I don't know, something like carbon capture and storage, is that something you're looking at as well? I know there's quite a few projects, whether it's Iceland or the North Sea, and perhaps using decommissioned oil fields. It might be unproven, but is that also something you're looking at?
Yeah, should I kick off maybe? We've been doing carbon capture for decades. So it's not a new technology, but it's suddenly got a lot of more traction now that net zero is on the agenda. It's absolutely something we're focused on, and you know, North Sea has a massive role to play in that regard. That also goes to hydrogen, and we have, you know, up north, fantastic opportunities to use cheap electricity in our resource base to make a difference.
And I think we need to end on that note. So thanks a lot. So as I said, we could talk about this for hours. So
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
That was a great panel.